Scientists threw millions of trees in this island. After 10 years, something incredible happened. It all began with a group of environmental researchers who were determined to fight back against a pressing ecological crisis. Each year, tens of millions of live Christmas trees in the United States alone were cut, decorated for a few weeks, and then discarded in landfills. When these trees decomposed, they produced carbon dioxide that contributed to the greenhouse effect. It was a daunting cycle, repeated annually, adding to the growing challenges faced by a planet already under stress from rapid climate change and rising sea levels. The scientists knew that if they didn't intervene, this resource, or waste, depending on perspective, would keep piling up. So they brainstormed a radical plan. What if these trees could be placed somewhere they could actually do some good? In an effort to test their idea, they partnered with a team of marine biologists, coastal engineers, and local governments. They zeroed in on a remote but populous island that had seen decades of environmental decline. It was a beautiful place, surrounded by crystal-clear waters, lush mangrove forests, and delicate coral reefs that once teemed with fish and marine life. However, in recent decades, rising sea levels and ferocious storms had begun to erode the coastline. Every year, the inhabitants witnessed more of their homeland slip beneath the sea. Farm fields became salted by brackish water, roads had to be rebuilt further inland, and storms struck with greater frequency and force. The islanders faced an existential threat. If nothing changed, they risked losing large swaths of their ancestral land. The proposal was simple and bold. Ship millions of used Christmas trees from the mainland to the island, then deposit them in strategic coastal zones to serve as natural barriers that could potentially rebuild wetlands and protect the shoreline. At first, local leaders were skeptical. Many wondered, how could piles of old spruce and firs stop the mighty waves? Wouldn't they just float away or rot in the tropical heat? The research team, however, had evidence from smaller projects. They'd seen how in other parts of the country, notably in marshy areas along the Gulf Coast, discarded Christmas trees were being deployed to shore up eroding lands. There, these trees captured sediment and provided a foundation for new vegetation to take root, effectively kickstarting a natural land rebuilding process. The scientists believed the same principle could apply to this island. Within months, boatloads of pine, spruce, and fir arrived. These trees were tied up in bundles, each cluster designed to form a tight barrier when placed along the shallow coastal flats. Helicopters were also brought in for particularly inaccessible spots. Young pilots, eager for flight hours, practiced carefully dropping the bundled trees into marshy areas. Onlookers were astonished. The sound of helicopter rotors slicing through the air mixed with the splash of firs hitting the water. The local newspaper ran front-page stories featuring pictures of Christmas trees bobbing along the coast, roped together in large clumps. Children stared wide-eyed, wondering how something that once held ornaments and lights in living rooms could suddenly become a beachside embankment. The first few weeks after the operation began were tense. Local fishermen complained that the new barriers might interfere with their nets. Environmentalists worried about the potential for toxins from any leftover paint or tinsel, though rigorous checks had been made to ensure that all trees were free of decorations. Some island elders said it was folly to believe that old holiday trees could reverse decades of erosion. Yet the scientists had confidence that, given time, the discarded Christmas trees would begin trapping silt and sand. They believed the submerged branches and trunks would become a supportive matrix for aquatic vegetation to anchor. Gradually, that vegetation would consolidate the sediment, rebuild coastal land, and nurture a revived ecosystem. 6 months went by. At first glance, there was little visible difference, except for clusters of brownish-green needles poking out at low tide. Public opinion remained divided, and local radio shows debated the merits of the program. "We see them out there just floating like driftwood," one skeptic said. "Is that really going to save our island?" In truth, the process was slow. Nature's restorative cycles often are. Still, the research team continued to gather data. They noted modest amounts of silt accumulating around the bundles. A handful of new plants started to take root in the shallower spots. As monsoon season arrived, each heavier downpour washed more sediment onto the barrier, gradually turning it into a muddy berm. Bit by bit, the old Christmas trees began to disappear beneath the muck. Within the next 2 years, patches of tall grasses had taken hold. The once lifeless, muddy shoreline became a nursery for baby fish, crabs, and shrimp. Island biologists observed a remarkable uptick in biodiversity. Egrets and herons started hunting among the new wetlands. Mangroves, transplanted from a nearby marine nursery, found purchase in the soft soil. Their prop roots wove around the submerged trees, further stabilizing the sediment. Helicopter deliveries of fresh Christmas tree bundles continued every January, expanding the barrier's reach along the new stretches of coastline. The synergy between the decomposing wood, the silt, and the emerging plants was evident to anyone who bothered to take a closer look. By the 3rd year, local fishermen had reversed their initial doubts. They noticed that some fish species were multiplying. With the wetland boundary more robust, storms carried less debris into island areas, and the calmer shallows offered better spawning grounds. The fishermen's nets grew heavier with the kind of catch their grandparents talked about from decades past. The island's elders, initially skeptical, saw that the muddy floods that once encroached on their yards each monsoon seemed less intense. The local government, witnessing the transformation, poured more resources into the operation: fuel for helicopters, more rope to tie up more bundles, and protective measures to keep curious tourists from trampling the new wetlands. By year 5, the scientists could publish real, tangible data. Satellite imagery showed that the island's coastline had extended noticeably outward in places where the bundles had been deployed. Over 100 hectares of land had effectively been restored or created, granting new real estate for the local ecosystem to flourish. On top of that, the newly formed wetlands served as a buffer against storm surges and high tides. Even in the face of increasingly violent storms, an unfortunate reality of climate change, the island seemed more resilient than before. The research team received international awards and grants, validating their unconventional strategy. Most importantly, the local community fully embraced the project, helping scout additional sites for tree placement and volunteering to replant more negative vegetation in the newly formed wetlands. The 10th year arrived, quietly at first. Tourists trickled in to see what locals called the Christmas Coast. Where once the shoreline had been rapidly eroding, now stood a healthy belt of wetlands, mangroves, and thriving marine life. You could walk out on platforms and watch the mud crabs scuttle, the herons pick their way through the grasses, and the baby fish dart among the mangrove roots. Charter boat operators offered tours explaining how each year fresh bundles of Christmas trees were added, reinforcing and expanding this life-giving zone. The shift was as visual as it was ecological. From battered beaches once threatened by every storm surge to a dynamic living environment that protected homes, roads, and farmlands beyond. One of the biggest hurricanes on record threatened the island, prompting evacuations and dire predictions. Many feared that whatever progress had been made would be washed away in hours, but when the storm finally passed, a miracle awaited. While there was damage, of course, some flooding, broken branches, scattered debris, it became apparent that the new wetlands had significantly blunted the brunt of the storm surge. Floodwaters in the main town were lower than historical levels for storms of similar veracity. The coastline, reinforced by millions of once discarded Christmas trees, had acted as a natural shield. Many scientists considered it a landmark achievement, a testament to nature-based solutions for climate resilience. More than that, the project showcased how something as humble as a holiday tree could become an instrument of ecological rebirth. Word of the island's success spread quickly. Other coastal communities, threatened by erosion and rising seas, sent delegations to study the phenomenon. Conservation groups pointed to it as a model for sustainable, community-driven efforts that repurpose waste into life-saving initiatives. The islanders, proud of their hard-earned victory, greeted these visitors with open arms, sharing both their experiences and their cautionary tales. While the Christmas tree strategy was no silver bullet, after all, climate change continued to challenge their survival, it proved a powerful means to buy time and restore some of what was lost. 10 years earlier, the notion of dumping millions of Christmas trees into the waters around this island had sounded outlandish. Yet in those 10 years, the improbable had become undeniable. Beneath the surface of marshy brine and thick mud, bundles of evergreens continued to decompose, feeding a cycle of renewal that strengthened both environmental and community. Where once stood a fragile coastline, there now thrived a living, breathing ecosystem. The transformation was so remarkable that it caught the attention of international news outlets, environmental journals, and curious travelers, all flocking to see how an island on the brink of losing its battle against the sea found hope in something as simple and as beautiful as a recycled Christmas tree. Scientists threw millions of trees in this island. After 10 years, something incredible happened. They found that when nature, when given the right tools and a bit of a helping hand, could heal herself in ways that surprised even the experts. And for the people of that island, who once feared a future swallowed by the ocean, it was nothing short of a gift, one born of holiday tradition and scientific ingenuity, now standing as a testament to resilience, creativity, and the enduring spirit of humanity's bond with the environment.